This episode is sponsored by Kerkering Barberio, your trusted partner in tax, audit, and outsourced accounting services. Serving Sarasota, Manatee, and the greater Tampa Bay area for over 50 years, KB helps clients achieve their personal and business goals. Visit kbgrp.com to learn more. I've written about IMG Academy in Bradenton for 20 years, covering the growth and expansion of what has become one of Manatee County's largest employers. In this episode of From the Corner Office, we talked to Brent Richard, the CEO, delving into what makes him an effective leader. To read more about big and growing organizations like IMG, subscribe to the Business Observer. Go to businessobserverfl.com. Hello, and welcome to the Business Observer's From the Corner Office podcast. I'm Mark Gordon, managing editor of the Business Observer. Today's guest is Brent Richard, CEO of IMG Academy. Brent, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mark. Happy to be here. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to get to know a little bit about IMG, what's been happening, what your goals are, and your career. But before we do that, I want the audience to kind of get to know you a little bit. And we're going to have some rapid fire questions. Or most of these are going to be sports themed. IMG Academy couldn't resist this opportunity. This one might not be sports themed though. Okay, first question. Who's one person, dead or alive, that you would love to have dinner with?
So these days I would love to have dinner with a series. I could have more than one, I would say. But at the same time,
yeah,
it would be like the greatest college coaches of all time.
I love it.
That are known for creating great humans in addition to great kids. So, top of my list, my kids in their room. I went through this whole phase at one point where I've got this amazing John Wooden book on family and leadership.
It's got to be John Wooden's got to be there.
My favorite quotes out. It's in my kids' room, but I love like a John Wooden with somebody, a little more modern that is also dealing with the realities of just the current college ecosystem, like a Nick Saban, would be fun. And just to hear their perspectives on building teams and leadership and working with, kids, and just also the evolution of where the world has gone.
We're like in the late 80s, early 90s episode number wise, and I think Nick Saban's name has come up on more podcasts than any other name because if we talk about business leadership and process-driven organizations, and that's that's what this guy does, right? He's the guy who's out recruiting the night he wins the national championship. He's on a jet recruiting somewhere. I mean, that's who he is.
Oh yeah, and these days, right, with the changing college landscape and everything that's happening, how do you continue to do that?
Yeah,
when the world's changing. I mean, just really, that'd be a fun one. I think the two of them in particular would be
excellent.
A fun
Love it. All right, second question: how many unread emails do you have right now?
A lot. Yeah, I'm not a. If the question is, am I a zero inbox guy? The answer is no.
You are not. Okay.
I am not. I have maybe and this is going to sound bad, but I have found that if I didn't get to something, now I try to prioritize, and I'm looking at things and constantly scanning, but it's just a high volume, and I have found that usually when things are important, I'll get the second email or the phone call.
Yeah.
And it drives my wife crazy. Actually, on my iPhone, I don't know if you guys do this, but I don't, when you've got the Gmail app, so that's my work, but my Gmail, or even on my text messages, little apps on the,
right.
I don't have the notification that says how many unread.
You could take that off? I never knew that.
You need to take it off. It will immediately help your sanity. You'll sleep better at night.
So you don't have the 58 or whatever, that number just gnawing at you. Wow, no. I did not know that.
Once it gets over 1,000, it also just gets big. And
yes. All right, and last question. Obviously, IMG Academy is known for its academics, but also its athletics. Take us inside. What is your greatest or most proudest athletic achievement of your life?
Yeah, I wish I had more. I had a few decent ones.
Yeah.
The one that I always I think about a lot was I had a hole-in-one when I was 12 years old. I was a decent golfer.
Yeah.
I love golf, and I was a decent golfer, and I was with my dad when it happened. And so for me, that was like the greatest sports experience.
Amazing.
And then maybe the second one that wasn't me, and I promise you this is a true story, is just last year, my son, my oldest, who was 7 at the time, had a hole-in-one.
Wow.
With me. And so I went back. It was on a par 3 course, and there's a whole debate as to whether that counts or not. But
it counts.
We're counting it in this.
It counts.
Mine when I was 12 was, in fairness, a full course. Not that I'll tell my son Theo that, but I went back and looked because I still have the plaque from my dad. Made a plaque with the ball and the scoreboard from when I had mine, and I wanted to make my son a plaque, and I went back and looked, and it was on the exact same date.
Wow.
June 18th. Obviously, a lot of years apart. But those have been, those have been some of the special ones.
That's really cool for you, obviously, to be with your dad and then your son to be with you. What a great moment for you, but your son as well, and your dad, all of them, all 3. That's excellent.
My son now thinks he's going to get a hole-in-one on every hole. So that's the problem on that.
Well, shoot for the stars.
Yeah, exactly.
You've had some really interesting stops. I saw Goldman Sachs, and you were in Australia. Obviously, Endeavor, a significant period of time there. Tell us kind of your career arc. How did you get to where you are today?
I think I learned early. It was maybe the common thread is who is as important as what. And so I just had some amazing people in that career arc that I, followed and learned from. But at Goldman, it was, a guy named Joe Ravitch. I started in the TMT group, but I really focused on sports and entertainment out of the gate. And there was an amazing partner named Joe Ravitch, who I've quickly learned, even at a place like Goldman Sachs, there's sort of these artists in business. This is a guy that, the Yankee Entertainment Sports Network, before RSNs were a thing, understood the nuance of revenue sharing and, how teams and like the Yankees could avoid it and create an asset out of a media property, and just came up with it, and was just amazed by that, and was an amazing guy, and had left Goldman with Joe to start a business that became the Rain Group. So I wanted to be an entrepreneur, love sports, love the business side of sports, love the idea of being an entrepreneur. And then it became Joe and a guy named Jeff Sine, who ran Morgan Stanley and UBS's investment banks, and learned a ton from Jeff as well over the years too. But this was somebody that details mattered. I'll never forget being on a plane with Jeff, and this was back then he was like, as big as it gets, and what I did. And here I was, this youngish guy, and we're on a plane sitting next to each other, flying to who knows where. And he looks over at me and he said, "Did you see the footnote on page 60 of a 10K?"
Wow.
And Jeff is, he was probably, whatever he was in his mid 50s, and, certainly didn't need to be reading the footnotes, but there's sort of attention to detail and nuance.
What a big lesson.
What's that?
What a big lesson to learn.
Details matter. Yeah, details matter. And, it certainly, it made me up my game a little bit. And then I met a guy along the way when I was at the Rain Group, which was a merchant bank. So we advised, but we also invested. So I got the opportunity to become an investor, all again in sports, media, entertainment, sector I loved. But I met a really special guy named Russ Pillar. And Russ was, he worked for Richard Branson, he worked for Bill Gates, just really incredible career and track record. But his whole thing was profits and purpose. And it's the combination of those two things that is the way to win in life and career, sort of merging your sort of mission in life with business. And it's okay. Those two things it's not all just sort of capitalism for the sake of capitalism. And that really sent me down, 15, 20 years ago, down the youth sports path, thinking about this is a really interesting place where maybe, we could do Iron Man was one of those ideas, to give you a sense. Sports less from the lens of entertaining people, which is what it is. Most sports, big business of sports is about selling eyeballs, selling tickets, selling bets, selling beers. By the way, not bad. In the business side of sports is that in most cases. But in some cases, it's really about what I grew up. My identity was the participation side of sports, what it meant to persevere, to endure, And so I think it's a really special, smaller market than the entertainment side of sports, but just a really special, place. So I owe Russ a lot on that. And then I found myself helping Ari Emanuel, who's an amazing entrepreneur, executive, Hollywood legend, but he was, coming out of this, phase of building the world's from nobody to the largest Hollywood talent agency, but really wanting to think more expansively. So I had the opportunity to help Ari buy IMG, which is bigger than just Academy, is but a piece of that. IMG Enterprise is much more all-encompassing. And then Ari convinced me to come join him at what became Endeavor. And so what an amazing experience. Ari, lessons from Ari were, business is a contact sport, but really thought about it. I mean, Ari most people don't know, he was a wrestler, growing up, but just this sort of an intensity around business as a sport, and really started to think about, we keep score. And we're playing, and just an amazing guy. Speed always wins. I mean, just a pace and intensity that I'd never seen. And Ari, the thing about him was amazing was he was incredibly curious, lifelong learner. I mean, the most curious human I've ever met, certainly in a business context. And so the whole culture of Endeavor almost sort of stemmed from this, constant curiosity, and ideation. And so Ari, and then Mark Shapiro, who was really Ari's right-hand partner, became the president of Endeavor, was when I came down to IMG, was then my move from sort of working more closely with Ari, a little more closely with Mark. And, he's ESPN legend, Dick Clark Productions, Six Flags, but really just team comes first, customer comes next. And if you get those two things right, everything else is going to be okay, but just really thought about, business from the product and the customer, lens, and special guy. And then now these days I've got and this guy, Andrew Fitzmaurice, who is the new chairman of my board. We spun IMG out from Endeavor. And so we now have a new amazing board that understands global education. And Andrew Fitzmaurice is the CEO of Nord Anglia Group, the largest K-12 education group in the world. They've got 80 or 90 schools, amazing outcomes and experiences for families. But he's just really taught me that there's a system and process to great leadership, and you can build and trust a system, really just thoughtful about how, great companies run. So I've just, for me, it's been this amazing journey of finding great people. And along the way, yes, there's sports and business and IMG, and there's all these interesting, transactions and decisions. But at the heart of all of it is just, where can I learn and who can I learn from? And I've just been blessed with some amazing people.
Yeah, certainly weave through a lot of very notable people in the world, sports, business, entertainment. Go back to Ari if you can. I'm just curious. You mentioned some of the things you learned from him. He's such a notable name in entertainment and sports. What's a story about him that, like, wow, this guy's amazing? You talked about, he moved fast and business is a contact sport, but what's an example of sort of what you saw him do?
Ari will write his own, story someday.
Yes.
And I think you just take the bigger picture. I could probably tell 20 specific stories, but just think about a Hollywood talent agency. right? Which is what it was. First of all, the entrepreneurship and the story, and he's got an amazing story about why and how he started it. But, when I kind of joined the journey, I mean, Hollywood talent agencies they were partnerships, right? And in those partnerships, it was very much a cash business. The partners had clients, you'd make money as a company, you then distribute it to the partners, but it was like a eat what you kill, the idea of like equity, that it was like a company was sustainable, almost like the investment banks, some of them way back, decades and decades ago, where you had these individual human, talent underneath a brand. And then all of a sudden they go public, they capitalize, they've got balance sheets, but nobody was thinking like that. They were thinking like, what did I make last year? How does that compare to whoever else made, some other amount? How's my client roster? How's my client list? And here's Ari saying, I'm going to go find a partner, which he did in Silver Lake and Egon, Durban, and I'm going to raise equity. And I am going to really defer the winnings, if you will, right? Because selling a share of your cash flow to a new partner in order to expand and grow and take these capabilities I have as an agency and make bets that I can find companies where those capabilities can add value, right? And just the greatest example is the UFC. What is the UFC? It's what Endeavor was great at was representing companies and brands like the UFC. They would sell sponsorship for them. They would help them build their brand. They would sell the US media rights. They would, through IMG, sell all the international media rights. They'd put on the events. So you had all of these capabilities, but you were always doing it on behalf of somebody else and earning a commission. Well, what if we thought a little differently about that? And what if we said, well, hey, I'd like to own some intellectual property and prove, if I'm doing this for other people, that we can do it for ourselves. And, the size of the bet, something like UFC, now in hindsight, but at the time,
right, it seems obvious now.
That was a massive,
right,
bet. And exactly what he said he was going to do. He got the media rights, they got the sponsorship. Now when they bought WWE, the history is later. But I just think that he was so far ahead of his time, and there were a lot of people telling him that he was wrong or he shouldn't do it or whatever. And, it always seems easy when you kind of look in the rearview mirror. But I can tell you, somebody that was in those conversations, just really impressive. How his desire and willingness to grow and make bets and change and transform. And, there's lots of little stories underneath it, but that's what I remember most about Ari.
Big story. I love it. Okay. So going back to IMG, obviously in your role, you have to oversee there's a whole business entity, and that means there's leaders under you. I'm curious what you look for in leaders. What stands out to you, whether it's promoting somebody at IMG, hiring somebody, working with your team. What stands out to you as good leadership characteristics?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's always the not fun part of that question, which is, do you really understand the role? What work needs to be done? And does the person you're hiring have they proven that they can do that work? And so that's always a part of the conversation. Really simple. Do we understand the work? Can the person do the work? But then you get on to sort of usually the answer is yes, and many people can do that. So then you get into sort of like who says it, and that tends to get into the softer, side of things. But certainly people that I've seen succeed, not only with me, but elsewhere, is productivity, like simple things. So many people, 90+% of people are wired to take orders and execute orders, which, by the way, is the baseline. You got to do that. But it's always the people that are looking around the corner, thinking about what's next, pushing the envelope, thinking about something I'm not thinking about, a new angle, new opportunity. So I was just, and it's hard. We have families, we have lives, we have, other interests out of work. And so and it goes a little bit back to that curiosity. You just have to be wired to push the envelope. For me, urgency. Life is short. Business cycles are incredibly short. And you just have to have a level of urgency day to day in the effort, and really feel like you've got a sort of fast pace and fast motor. Accountability. I always say great leaders have a combination of vision on one hand. Great managers don't always have to have vision. Great leaders have to have some vision. The business or their area, something that's different, that's going to change and transform. But on the other hand, you also have to have systems and process. Because if you have vision without systems and process, it's great, but you can shout it from the mountaintop. But in big organizations in particular, smaller startups, you can get away with it, actually. But bigger organizations, you got to have system and process. And so I just think great leaders show the balance in both. It's if you have too much of one, if you have one without the other, it just doesn't work. But when you have both, it tends to work. The one that I talk to folks a lot about is emotional endurance. You try to pick other words, but it's hard, and you really have to, you have to be okay with failure. You have to be, okay with the grind. You have to be okay with the ups and downs that come, with it. And some people have it and some people don't. And if I had another one that I'd probably put on my top 5 list, and maybe it's the first one always, I'd say it's the baseline. Nobody gets past. You have to have high integrity. You have to have high integrity to work with me. And certainly in a consumer product, certainly in something where you're dealing with families and students, and something as important as their education, you have to have incredibly high integrity.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned setbacks, failures, right? That's part of life, part of business, sports for sure, right? There's only one Super Bowl winner, so how in your life have you sort of learned to, or is there an example of how you have overcome, whether it was a business setback, a sports setback, some setback, or something in your life that you learned from that didn't go the way you wanted?
Yeah. Every year, every day, once a month. Yeah. No, I mean, it is, but you have to push ahead. I think, what would I point? The thing I was having this conversation the other day, going back a little bit in my life, but one of the things that I think taught me some early lessons, I didn't appreciate it at the time, was, when I was playing college soccer at the time, that was my, school was obviously important. I was at Vanderbilt, but, soccer was my life. And I was a starter and a captain as a sophomore, which was a pretty,
big deal.
Pretty big
SEC school, that's pretty big.
Interestingly, men's soccer wasn't in the SEC because there weren't enough men's SEC soccer team to play. Kentucky and South Carolina were the only other teams. You needed 4 for a conference. So women's soccer. Anyway, and by the way, men's soccer actually isn't at Vanderbilt anymore, unfortunately. So but in any event, we were in the Missouri Valley Conference. And but injury, life, who knows? But, all of the above. And, by the end of my sophomore year and in my junior year, I wasn't starting anymore. And by the time I was getting into my senior year, academics became more important. Now I'm doing 110 hours a week, a summer internship at Vanderbilt instead of, traveling around playing soccer. And I was very much riding the bench. By my senior year, yet I was a captain. And, it was at the time, when I grew up with, the best players were the captains. If not the best players, it was very much lead by example. And so it was a very hard thing for me at the time to figure out this balance between not being an individual contributor in the field, but also being a leader. And I think that when I look back on it, that was just incredibly hard, for me. But I also think that it probably helped me learn, the benefit of hindsight, how to lead without having to be the individual contributor, which in truth is, now that I think about my life these days, is increasingly exactly what you have to do. And so it was maybe taking a while to get back to it, but that was a hard thing for me, and I think that probably taught me some important leadership lessons too.
Yeah, for sure, especially at a young age. All right, as we wind down here, we're early 2025, and IMG Academy's gone through obviously a big ownership change in the recent past. Looking ahead, what are some big things you're looking forward to at IMG Academy, say for 2025 and beyond?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we have an amazing ownership group. Amazing. They understand education, which means they understand that first and most importantly is we have to have a great experience and product for our families. Nothing else matters. If we do not have an amazing product and experience for our families, the rest of it doesn't matter. And so we're constantly focused on how do we improve the experience for our families. And I'm excited. We've got, with the unique thing about IMG Academy versus your average, let's call it school, is that we have a brand that is global. It really is. And it gives us an opportunity to have a tremendous amount of impact beyond our campus in a way that most school brands just don't. I compare us to the Harvard Business School of youth sports. There's the physical school, but Harvard Business School also has exec ed. They have Harvard Business Online. They have HBR, podcasts and articles. And so I think about our world as we're improving that campus experience every single day. We're investing in the product and the people. We're adding sports. In particular, we've been really focused on girls sports. So we launched volleyball last year. We announced softball this year. We actually just announcing boys volleyball, here in the next few days. We got a few more up our sleeve. So we really just think there are opportunities to continue to add sports and quality on campus. And then we have so many great opportunities for families that can't get to campus, opportunities to reach them with some of our intellectual property. Nothing's as special as coming to that campus and having the full experience. But we have IMG Academy Plus. We have tens of thousands of families all around the world. We have surfers in Australia that have a mental performance coach that is one-on-one, just like we're talking about here, that you meet with once a week. We've got a version of that that's, let's call it more of the master class or Netflix, kind of think about it, $10 a month now. All of a sudden, families can get nutrition, mental performance these days, NIL training, communication, leadership, all these life skills that sports provide a platform for. And then college matriculation, we've got big, college is really hard. And part of what we do is create great holistic education, but a part of our job is to get them into those college roster spots. We've got software and technology that's very proprietary and that we've built. And we think that there's a ton of opportunity, in that space. Educate the student athletes, create great holistic education, get them to college. And it's just a lot of fun we can have with all of that.
Excellent. A lot happening at IMG Academy in Bradenton. Brent Richard, CEO of IMG Academy, thank you for joining us on the From the Corner Office podcast.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Business Observer From the Corner Office podcast. I'm your host, Mark Gordon. This podcast was produced by Reed Corley of the Corley Company in Sarasota. To hear more episodes of From the Corner Office podcast, go to businessobserverfl.com.